What's happening? Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, everybody.
Yeah. This guy's back. He's back. He's on fire.
Yeah. It's pretty hot here indeed.
Well, not here.
Yeah,
Celsius.
As I was going to say this before we went on air, but the winter hat thing's not a look for us. This is just how New Hampshire's. We're hitting. What are we hitting tonight, Joel? Like negative.
Oh, well, they're saying negative 30 with the wind. Like it's insane. So
Fahrenheit, right?
They shouldn't even tell you after like doesn't matter, right? I mean, everything's frozen. It's not doesn't matter. Gets to a certain point, just run it. Yeah, it's scary. Yep. Josh Marcella, good night, good evening, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Hey,
Josh is another horror author up in Maine, Ronald. So that's cool to have him on board too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. We're excited to have you on here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Big fan. So I wanted to reach out to you. I was just saying before we came on, I got the chance to read Seasons Creepings here right up to Christmas. You sent it to me. Oh, by the way, I got to show this for anyone that watches. I have to say, if you can order directly from authors, try to do it, because if you can get a signed copy, it's just so cool to have. And someone like Ronald goes above and beyond. He actually does some artwork on the inside cover here. He doesn't just sign the book. Yeah, that's so cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, and came with a cool bookmark, nice swag. So
that kind of answers my first question, because I was about to ask you if he keeps on drawing or just left it in the past. It seems that he continues to do so.
Yeah. I guess that's a good question. Do you still draw for fun, or do you kind of just doodle in the books there a bit, or?
I kind of got heavily into the writing for a long time and got away from the artwork. But recently, I've started. I've done a few covers, book covers. I did. We re-released another Halloween collection called Mr. Glowbones and Other Halloween Tales, and I did the cover to that. And I also had 12 pieces of interior artwork in it. So I'm starting to put, to get back into the artwork and start putting it in my books. So,
wow.
That's what I started out being. When I was a kid, I was an artist. And I didn't have any, aspirations of being a writer until I was like 16 years old, because in high school I got into comic books very heavily, and then started doing my own comic books. I collaborated with a guy named Lowell Cunningham, a fellow classmate, and we did a few comic books and together, and then I started doing my own comic books and writing my own comic books, and then it just slowly gravitated to just fiction. And the funny thing about I remember when I got out of high school, Lowell called me and he said, I've sold my first comic book series. It's called The Men in Black. And I said, I was kind of out of comics then. I said, oh, that's nice. I'll have to pick up a copy when it comes out. And then I just kind of forgot about it. And then a few years later, I was sitting in the movie theater and there was his name up on the screen as the creator. So
that's everyone's dream when they make a comic or even, write novels. Like, I mean, I don't even care. Just to see my creation up on the screen, I don't even know. I'd probably see it 100 times just because, but
I've been waiting a long time to see that. I hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah. Oh man. Hey, you never know, right? I mean,
you never know.
I heard Disney spending like $8 billion on content now for streaming. So this might be your time, Ronald. They might step up and
and Netflix has been putting a lot of good horror out too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting better. Instead of the studios just wanting to rehash, Jason or Freddy, or Michael Myers over and over again. They're starting to look at fresh properties and stuff like that. So everybody has a chance now.
Yeah, it's so huge for them to. It's like Blumhouse does a lot of original horror stuff, and then 824 Studios, I think it is. They do some. They're the ones that did Midsummer. But yeah, it's huge right now. And actually, I saw in an old interview of yours or something I read, I don't recall, but you were talking about how horror was back now. You had left the genre for a bit. You'd stopped writing when it kind of died off a bit.
Right.
I was just a kid at that point, so I didn't realize it died off. The stuff I was reading was the stuff that was popular before, right? Like when I found Stephen King and all that, that was in the 90s. But it seems like it's back. And I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't feel like it's going anywhere this time. It feels like with all the small publishers out there, the indie publishers, it feels like horror is always going to have its spot now. I just don't see how it'll die off again. But
well, when I was writing, I started out in the small press. There was like dozens and dozens of small press horror magazines, and that's where I sort of cut my teeth and learned to trade by writing for these little magazines and made a name for myself. And I had an agent. I wrote my first horror novel. It was called The Tobacco Barn. My agent shopped around for 2.5 years before he found a publisher for it. I think he started at A and went to Z because Zebra Books picked it up. And I wrote for them for 6 years, wrote 8 books for them. And then in 1996, the horror industry was booming in the late 80s and early 90s. And then it got so glutted with, really bad books. The mass market was feeding the appetites of the readers and at an incredible rate. And they were putting out some really, ill plotted bad horror, and readers were getting burnt and they stopped buying them and sales went down. And then the publishers started shutting down their horror lines. And I must have been pretty naive back then. I was like late 20s, early 30s, but I thought everything was fine and everything. And then on October 6th, 1996, it's like my own personal 9/11. My agent called me and he said, "It's over with." He said, "Zebra shut down their horror line." And he said, "My advice to you is to write anything but horror because time and no editors or publishers wanted to read it, new stuff." So, well, I tried my hand at different stuff and it didn't work. I got frustrated and a little bitter, and because I'd worked years and years trying to get to that point and then lost it just with a phone call.
Right.
And so I stopped writing for 10 years and I stopped reading horror for 10 years, and I didn't come back till 2006. The reason I came back was because I had a friend, and he was always trying to convince me to come back into writing. He said, I remember he came to me one time and said, "There's this guy named Brian Keene, and he's written this zombie book, and it's revitalized the horror industry." And I said, "Well, I'm just not interested in doing that anymore. That's a thing of the past." And so a couple of years later, he said, "Well, over on Robert Mccammon's board, they're talking about you. They want to know if you're dead or not." So, so I went over there, and everybody was just saying really interested in me and my books and everything. So, I thought, well, maybe I can do this again. So I read Brian's The Rising, and I read James Newman's Midnight Rain, and I thought, well, I think I can do this again, And so I announced that I was coming back, and right after I thought, "You idiot! You hadn't written anything in 10 years." But I mean, it just it was like I'd always been writing. So, it was like riding a bicycle.
I was going to actually, before you even, like a couple minutes back, I was going to ask if it was like riding a bike and you just picked it right back up and went with it again. So
actually, I wrote a little better because I guess at the end of the Zebra era, the thing with Zebra, they wanted these big 450 to 500 page books. I mean, that's what was selling really good back then. And that, you had to put a lot of subplots and a lot of extra characters and really fatten it up, to get to that 500 word. That was in the contract. That was a stipulation.
Oh, man.
But and sometimes I had like 150, 200 page book, and I had to stretch it out to 450, 500 pages. And it got to the point where I was getting a little burnt out with that, Yeah. And so when I came back, I was like almost energized. I mean, it was like I'd had this big long vacation and I was ready to get back in the saddle again.
That's great. Yeah, it's to your point with the length, back then that was like a bigger thing. Now with the shorter attention spans, it feels like this is the age of the novella too. Like it's they are blowing up right now. In these horror groups online, I mean, every book being promoted, I feel like is like 150 pages. So I never even read one until the past few years, and now it's like, man, with life with 2 kids, I'm like, these are beautiful. Like I can finish one of these quick. So
myself, I've been really focusing on the short story collections. I've been putting out little novella length short story collections, and the series, each book is a novella length. So I'm getting into that groove too, where I like to write that length. If somebody came to me and said, write me a 500 page book, I'd probably run for the hills because I've been there, done that, and it's not easy. It's not easy writing a big book like that.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, granted, I'm just starting out, but what I'm writing right now is the equivalent of about 260 pages, and I'm like, yeah, this feels perfect. I don't see how I could double this. Like it would just, like you said, there'd be a lot of subplot stuff that's like, man, I don't know. But so speaking of the Rising, it was pure coincidence for myself, but I was out of horror for a bit. I had stopped reading horror, and I remember going in a bookstore and picking up the Rising on the bookshelf, and I didn't know that it was like a big book at the time. I just saw it and bought it, and I credit Brian to this day for making me want to write. Like when I read it in 8th grade, that got me into horror, but when I read The Rising, I'm like, man, I want to do this. Like this makes me want to write horror. So and then you mentioned Robert Mccammon too. Swan Song is my all-time favorite book. Like if you guys haven't read the Swan Song, I mean, this is not novella. This is like an 800 plus page book, but that book is my favorite book of all time. So
and I like Boy's Life too.
Boy's Life, yeah,
that's my favorite coming of age novel.
Yes, it's amazing. I just wanted to point that you mentioned both their names. I'm like, man, those are 2 of my favorites right there. So, but
I'm a big fan of Joe R. Lansdale too.
Yeah.
Me and Joe. I mean, Joe was almost a mentor to me when I was starting out. I'd call him up for advice, and he'd say, "Well, I'm going to do martial arts. Call me back in an hour and a half," and I'd call him back, and we'd talk about stuff and all that. And so he's always, I finally got to meet him a few years ago, and it was great because, back then you didn't get to go to convention. I mean, there wasn't that many conventions and stuff. I mean, you had the World Horror Convention, but you didn't have the amount that you have today, and you didn't get to meet fellow writers or your readers, But nowadays through social media, I mean, I've got tons of my readers are my friends or personal friends now, so it's been great.
Yeah, it's especially in this day and age where we're sitting, virtually like this too, doing like shows, and it's wild. We got Rogerio up here in Brazil, down in Brazil, but he's above me. Your books are awesome. I would agree, Emily.
Yeah.
But it's cool. I mean, you get to talk to you in Tennessee. You get to talk to Brian Keene in Pennsylvania, like we're just talking to all these people that we just wouldn't be able to if it wasn't for this. So, but yeah. So I'm hijacking, Joel. I don't think I've let you say a word yet. So
no worries.
I'll jump in here. So we were talking briefly before the show. Ronald's a big EC fan. I'm a big EC fan. Might pull some samples off the wall here to share. But you mentioned a brush with greatness, and I wanted to hear the story. So,
before I tell you that, let me tell you something else.
Okay.
My love for EC probably started before I was born, and let me tell you why.
All right.
When my mother was pregnant with me, it was 1959. My daddy was overseas in Germany. Actually, he was in the same unit as Elvis Presley, but he never saw Elvis. You know, I think they had him, tucked away somewhere. But Mama rented this old house, where she lived while she was pregnant. Well, she went upstairs one day to put some boxes up in the attic and found a big old tall stack of EC comic books. And of course, this was like maybe 8 or 9 years after EC got shut down because of the standard, the moral standards and stuff like that. But anyway, during her pregnancy, she read that stack of EC comic books, Tales from the Crypt and Haunt of Fear and all that all through her pregnancy. So I kind of attribute that to sort of sinking into me and get
right. That's awesome.
While other babies were being read Dr. Seuss and Grimm's fairy tales, I was getting a diet of decaying corpses and axe murderers. So
you don't happen to have any of those still, do you?
Oh no, I never saw any of those. I wish I wish I had a big old stack right now.
Right.
I have a small stack. They go around. I'll have to. I can't talk the talk and not show it, so they bring one down here. So I consider this the greatest horror cover ever. This is, of course, Graham Ingles, Ghastly Graham Ingles. Probably Graham the greatest.
Great.
Oh, this cover is second to none in my opinion, and it's a rough copy. I don't, a lot of people like these perfect comics and stuff, and man, if the thing's 60, 70 years old, I expect it to have some grit and wear and on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Look.
Yeah. Kids hold these up, they stuck them in their pocket, and things. I mean, it needs to tell its own story, and I think there's some kind of a charm and appeal to that. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me tell you about my brush with greatness now.
All right, sure. Yeah.
Okay. When I was 16 years old, I was writing my own comic books, and being the dumb, brash 16-year-old I was, I sent some stuff to DC Comics. I had a character called the Amphibihuman. It was a guy that had a frog head and a frog leg and a frog arm. So, it was kind of my take on Swamp Thing or Man Thing or something like that. But I sent to DC, and a art director, wrote me back. And this art director was named Jack. And so for the next 3 or 4 months, we corresponded back and forth, and he was telling me, about, how to set up panels and dialogue, boxes and stuff like that. And it kind of, after a while, look, I knew, well, unless I move up to New York, after high school, back then you had to be there to do the comics and stuff. So I started getting the idea that, well, maybe I'm better suited at being a writer than being a comic book artist. So my correspondence kind of petered out, and we didn't write, correspond anymore. So, flash back like 40 years, because that was 46 years ago that, I sent that stuff to DC. Well, I found my old letters, the old correspondence, and at the bottom it said Jack Davis, and the signature was what you see in that little round circle on the covers, whenever he did the covers or the introduction pages, and for a couple of years I puzzled over that, and I thought, well, is this him? And so I went to my go-to guy. I went to Brian King, who's he's worked for Marvel and DC, and I said, could you tell me something? Could you tell me if Jack Davis worked at DC in the mid 70s? It wasn't like 30 seconds later he texted me back and said, yes indeed. He said, that's pretty cool. And I've had some people say, well, Jack Davis was too, he was doing Mad, he was doing advertisements and stuff. He probably wasn't working for DC at the time, but I've had other people tell me that that he might have had a editorial position there during that time. So I'm sticking with that. I'm gonna say he was the guy. But
what's the odds that somebody would have the same name with the same signature, right? Trying to
yeah. I mean, it was that his signature was pretty unique, and from what I heard, he was the kind of guy who would take interest in a budding artist who I guess he might have saw Amphibian Human as a sort of a horror superhero kind of thing, but that was pretty, along with that and working with Lowell, that was two really strange things, like in rural Tennessee, that I would make a connection like that.
Do you still have the letters, or did they end up disappearing too over time?
No, I still got them. I've got them packed away somewhere, but
good.
And the envelope that came in had like Batman standing on Superman's shoulder and Wonder Woman, and they were all standing on top of each other's shoulders. It was pretty cool. It had the illustrated envelope. I wish I had them with me right now. I'd show them to you.
No problem. Yeah, it's amazing how difficult it is to find like marketing material for EC. They didn't do a lot of like promotional stuff. It wasn't posters and patches and things. It's just that they just didn't do that stuff back then. So it's like the only thing you can find sometimes is like fanzines or fan-made newsletters is kind of a cool thing that you can find on top of obviously the books and stuff. But right now, IDW is putting out tremendous full tomes of the artist edition of all the original art boards. I don't know if you've seen those.
I think I've seen them on Amazon.
Oh, yeah, they are fabulous. They're going to bankrupt me. Damn you, IDW.
I used to have the slipcase, the hardcover slipcase with the volumes, and the comics were black and white. They wasn't color, but I used to have those. I think I sold them in the yard sale. I'm dummy.
Us guys appreciate that. That end up secondhand. So thank you. But the artist edition, it's a great insight on how they put things together in that process, and you can see like white out and smudge, and Jack's making a note over here and things. It's very really neat. So it's great that it's number one, amazing that survived in like the Gaines family. That there's not like missing pages. I mean, they're full issues that they put in these. I call them a tome. I mean, you have to have a viewing area to read these things. They're like a meter tall. I mean,
that's good.
But it's just incredible that stuff survived 70 years, and that we're here, able to look at it in the future and relish on it. And just awesome.
That's great. I'll have to check that out. I'll have to.
So cool. Yeah, they're doing a great job.
Yeah, I see it when you were buying them for a bit there. They
just be my eyes
here. Yeah, you hold it up to here, and it would be like down to like your knees almost. Like it's wild.
It's almost impossible to read. They're massive. I mean, it's like and that's the original board size that they used when they were drawing. Was that size?
Insane.
So
that's great.
Yeah, awesome.
Ronald, by being a newborn Christian and at the same time being a horror author, do you get any backlash from that community just because you write about evil stuff?
Actually, I haven't had much. I mean, I'm a church-going guy, and all the people at church know I write, and most of them know that I'm a horror writer, and I've never had anybody, condemn me or say that I shouldn't be writing it, and I've written some pretty extreme stuff, I can, I pretty much write traditional stuff. I write what I call Southern fried horror. It's set in the American South, usually in Tennessee, and but I've written a lot of extreme splatterpunk stuff too. Because back in the 90s, when I was writing for the little magazines, I was also being published in some of the big anthologies like Shock Rock and Hot Blood, and when the splatterpunk movement came, the editors were wanting this extreme horror, and we was feeding the beast. We was writing that stuff and kind of one up each other, trying to write the most disgusting stuff we can write, and so I did some of that, and so years later, when I came back in 2006, I put together a little collection called The Essential Six Stuff, which was like 7 or 8 of my splatterpunk stories, and it did really well. And then like 2018, I think we put out more 6 stuff, and then Silver Shamrock in 2020 put out The Essential Six Stuff, and that had like 32, extreme horror stories, and this last year it won the Splatterpunk Award for Best Collection, which is the first award I've ever won in my career. So that was a big thrill.
Yeah.
But I was afraid when Essential Six stuff came out. Well, people were gonna get a copy and they're gonna read it and they're gonna think, this isn't the Ronald Kelly I know.
Yeah.
But no, everything's been it's been very positive. You wouldn't believe how many Christians and spiritual people are in the horror industry, and we don't go overboard and start preaching to folks and stuff like that. We pretty much live and let live, and everybody has their own thing, but there's more out there than you'd think. But that I've had struggles, thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't be writing this stuff, but I mean that's in my genetics. I think I just I'm good at that, and I'm not really good at anything. I'm pretty good at westerns. I can write a good western, but I'm mostly a horror suspense guy.
Well, speaking of western, your new book here, Deadeye, it seems like it has some western elements, some horror elements. So it seems like a good segue to bring up the new book and talk about that. Roger, he might have had another question though. I didn't mean to.
No, keep going. I do have another question, but sorry.
Well, it was a good segue because you mentioned westerns and yeah. No, tell us a little bit about the new book. I can't wait to get it. I ordered the hardcover edition from you there, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, right. Now Deadeye started. I mean, Deadeye is like 45 years old. I mean, I made up Deadeye when I was making up all my comic book characters because I was reading Western novels, Louis L'Amour and writers like that, and I really loved like the old spaghetti westerns, with Clint Eastwood, and so I made up a character called Deadeye. It was a former rebel officer who came home and found his wife and children murdered, and went on a long revenge, filled journey to find their killers. Well, that I never did put it in a comic book, so I just put it, I just kind of put it in my mother had an old cedar chest, and I put all my old papers in that. So, and it's like the size of a coffin, so I put Deadeye in the casket, and so when I started writing for Zebra and everything, I thought, well, I think I'm gonna write no, this was before Zebra. I was wanting to be a Western writer, but the genre was real narrow. I mean, it was hard to get into. So I decided to resurrect Deadeye and do like a big epic, book about the size of a Lonesome Dove or something like that. Lonesome Dove went around then, but I think it was Brian Garfield's Wild Times, which was a very long novel. So I sat down and wrote this big long novel of Deadeye, and it turned out to be 880 pages, and sent it to my agent, and he said, no, we can't be, the Western market, they're accustomed to 150 to 200 pages. They're not going to buy this 880 page book. So back in the cedar chest, Deadeye went. So then I started writing for Zebra, and I did like 2 of the Jake Logan series. I ghost wrote those because my agent said, do you want to get in on this? They had like 5 writers writing this Western series, and it was a character driven series with the same character per every book, and he had like 3 or 4 sex scenes in each book, so that was a requirement of a writer to put those sex scenes in there. So I kind of wrestled with that for a while, and I called Joe Lansdale, and he said, I've ghostwritten before, you might want to go for it. So I told my agent I would, and I wrote 2. I wrote 2 Jake Logans. Wow. It was a sweet gig. I mean, you'd write a little 150 page book, and they'd pay you a flat $5,000, and back then that was really good money.
Right.
So about the time that I finished the second book, they shut down Jake Logan. I guess publishing, mass market publishing at that time was kind of shaky, So they shut down Jake Logan for a while, and when they brought him back, they already had those spots filled. So I thought, well, I'm going to dig up Deadeye, and I'm going to pitch it to Berkeley as a horror Western series. And I was going to have Deadeye be a zombie gunfighter, and he's going to fight a different monster in every book. And they were interested at first, and then they figured, well, you're not going to be able to sustain a monster book for a very long period of time, because they were used to putting out 200-300 books in a series. If I pushed it too far, I'd be having Deadeye fight aliens and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster.
Hey, it could be a network for that.
So that didn't go over well. So I put Deadeye back in the casket again, and then when I came back in 2006, I did a lot of work with Paul Goblich, the Thunderstorm Books, doing limited editions and everything. And he put out all all of my Zebra books in a set called the Essential Ronald Kelly Collection.
Oh man!
And they're very hard to find. They're very rare. So
that's too bad. That'd be cool to get. Yeah, I just discovered Thunderstorm a few years ago, so I just started collecting them recently.
You can find them every now and then on eBay. Yeah. But they have a high price tag on them. But I said, well, I've got this idea to do a little series, called Deadeye, and he said, well, that sounds interesting, but right now, I've got something going on, and I told him, well, I do too. I was busy, so, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago. Well, Death's Head Press, started putting out the splatter westerns, and got really popular. And I thought, well, this is a good time as any to bring, Deadeye back. And by this time, there was a lot of other possibilities, that I could add to the story, because I've been reading a lot of cosmic horror, Hattie Piper and Mary San Giovanni. And, when I was 14, I tried to read Lovecraft, and it just went completely over my head. And now I've gone back and read a little bit of Lovecraft. So I decided to incorporate a little bit of cosmic horror into Deadeye, and just plain traditional horror, a lot of black humor in it, and I paired Deadeye up with a black Louisiana Mojo man named Job, like Job from the Bible. And it's been so fun writing these books, because I mean, the word play and dialogue between them is, it's just, it flows. It's,
Awesome.
It's, some very dark humor and stuff like that. And so it's been really fun to write. And so Deadeye, in the Deadeye series, Joshua Wingate, a Confederate soldier who come back from the war, he finds that his plantation has been overrun, and by an outlaw vampire and his henchmen, who are like demonic, demons, and there's like a witch, a black African American witch with him too, called Evangeline. And they turn his wife into a vampire, and they abduct his only son. So I'm not going to get too much into the plot, because, but
unlike me, I give the whole story away.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really easy to do that with this one, but eventually he becomes Deadeye, and he goes, on this long track across, the way out of the South and across the West to pursue the vampire and try to get his son back. But it's going to be a series of 5 books over 3 years. We just released book 1. Thunderstorm did the hardcover edition, a limited hardcover, and Silver Shamrock is doing the ebook, the trade paperback, and an affordable hardcover. So it's been selling really well. I mean, I think it was number 76 earlier today when I looked, and so as long as it can be in the top 100, that'd be, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I think John has to take top 10,000, but you're like, yes.
Oh
yeah,
man, I'm so excited about this book. I can't wait for it. And you explaining it too, that makes me more excited. I was talking to actually Josh Marcella, he was commenting earlier. I just love the idea of horror Western hybrids. And my dad, like when I was growing up, my dad is obsessed with Westerns still to this day. He's obsessed with John Wayne. I actually drew a portrait of John Wayne that he hung in his living room. But he used to read all the Louis L'Amour books. So like it used to be a challenge. We would go like Christmas shopping and try to find one that he didn't have. And like back then, to me, Westerns were Westerns. I couldn't remember titles,
right.
So I'd come home and he'd be sleeping with the remote on his stomach with the Western channel on, so that's just how it was. But so I look back now and I regret it. I wasn't into Westerns as a kid, and he absolutely was. But now I'm like, man, I love a good Western. And when you throw in horror, it's just, I don't know, that's right in my wheelhouse. So, that sounds awesome. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I will.
Ronald, you mentioned you wrote 800-page book. This is not something that we just go through, and
no,
it takes a long time. a lot of passion, and you got rejected. How does it feel to get rejected after so many hours of hard work? And fuck, I would have given up. You know, I don't have that kind of strength. What kept you going?
Well, yeah, it was a big letdown. I mean, that was like a 2-year period that I wrote that thing, you know. But you know, looking now, you know, I've still got that manuscript, you know, and I will probably go back and go through it and pick out things for this Deadeye that I used in the other Deadeye, you know. So it wasn't a wasted effort, I don't think. It was. I was, you know, I got it out there today and read a few pages, and it was pretty crude, and it was, I mean, very sloppily plotted and all that. So it, you know, it really didn't have a chance back then anyway. You know, I mean, as a writer, I have always, you know, tried to be, you know, go for the positive. You know, that's why I submitted work to DC when I was 16 years old. You know, which I think that's a good thing. I think if you think it's better to not to, you know, just take that step and take that chance than just to be afraid to do it and because I know writers right now who are afraid to submit their work because they don't think, you know, it's good enough or no one wants to read it. But you know, you got to take that chance. You got to, you know, you got to build your confidence. You know, it's just a thing that comes with, you know, with practice and you know, learning your craft and kind of building your own voice.
Yeah, that's good information. I mean, you obviously have been doing it for quite some time, so I'm sure you've developed a pattern as far as like how you go about it. So when you write a book, how many do you do? Like one draft is just getting the plot together, second draft is tightening it up, or like how's your process when it comes to writing a book?
Well, actually, when I write a book, I write the first chapter, and before I go to the second chapter, I go over it and I edit it and polish it, and I'll go back to the second chapter and do the same thing. And you know, of course, with a novel, I always wrote in 3 sections. It was like part 1, part 2, and part 3. So when I got to the part 1, I'd go back and I'd edit the thing as good as I could get it. Then go to part 2 and do it chapter by chapter. Then at the end, go back and do a thorough editing. So when I got to the end of the book, there wasn't a whole lot to do. I mean, a lot of you know, a lot of writers get to the, you know, like with a short story. Yeah, I'll wait till the end of the short story to go back and polish it up and edit it and all that. And I know a lot of people these days like to have beta readers that read their stuff and give them feedback and stuff. You know, we never had that back when I was writing. You know, I mean, the only way you could get it to somebody is snail mail. I mean, you put it in an envelope, you do a carbon copy of it and put it in an envelope and mail it off, and you know, a story could be gone from 6 months to a year before you'd hear from it. You know? Nowadays, you email it and you could get an answer in an hour. You know, so I mean, the writing process has you know really advanced since I started writing. I mean, I started writing on an old 1910 typewriter. You know, the big old black typewriters that you see in the old 1940s movies and stuff like that. My daddy got one out of the storeroom where he worked and brought it home to me, and then I just kind of progressed to a better typewriter, to an electric typewriter, to a word processor, to a computer. I mean, it's been I've been writing for 46 years and professionally for 35 years. So I've seen how, you know, the writing process has really, advanced and evolved over the years.
Yeah, you can carry the laptop around now and not worry about it.
I think the old heavy typewriter was like 50 pounds, right? Carry those things around.
I feel like I remembered. I read On Writing by Stephen King, and I feel like I remember him saying he sat in like his laundry room with the typewriter.
Yeah, he did.
First book. Yeah,
I've done that too. I've sat in the closet and typed.
Oh man. I can't even. I usually sit down here in my basement. It's the only place. I try to do it sitting upstairs when my wife's like watching TV, and I'm like, man, I can't do this. I need to go somewhere. So, but yeah,
seems like a theme. Like most writers need a spot to do it. Like
yeah.
Do you find that too, Ron? You have like a certain spot in the house, or like do you find yourself outside sometimes? Does it carry with you, or do you have to be in that certain mindset and setting to pull that work off?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I still work for a living. I work for PPG, the largest paint company in the world. It used to be Pittsburgh Paint, but so I still work full time, and I write in the afternoons when I get home, and usually on the weekends I'll stay up till 2-3 o'clock in the morning and write. So wife and kids are asleep when I'm doing all this sick creating I do.
Yeah. John and I are the same, and it's a nighttime, literally by the midnight oil for doing these
really.
types of work.
Oh, when I told my wife that I had a short story accepted into an anthology, she's like, "When did you write that?" I'm like, "When you were in bed." And then when she read it, she's probably like, "Yeah, I can see why." It's about pretty much cannibals. So
of course, I always have the wheels turning in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, when I go home in the evening, I have a wallet full of little pieces of paper with sentences and ideas on it. I just toss them on my desk. I got to go through them and see if I can make anything out of them. But
have you done this yet, Ronald? I don't know if you've gotten to this point or if you just keep it old school, but on my notepad on my phone, most of these are story ideas or like scene ideas for like stuff I'm writing. I
need to do that. I mean, I guess it was the habit of just jotting it down on a pad or something. And but I mean, I should do that on my phone.
I actually just ordered like an author's notepad because I kind of wanted to start handwriting it out. I feel like I'm on this thing so much. I'm like, I don't need to also do that in it. Like I could actually handwrite some of this stuff out, but it's I feel like we talk about as creatives, like your mindset like really never leaves there. We were talking to Alan Baxter, and he would say when he's in his office, if his wife walks by to say something to him and he's just sitting there staring at the ceiling, she's like, "You're working," and just leaves him alone. He's just thinking of a scene basically in his head. So
my wife can tell me, she can tell when I'm in the zone, and and she does, she makes it, she's very careful not to break my train of thought because but we've been married for 30 years now, so end of this month, so she knows me pretty well.
That's awesome.
She actually really convinced me to come back in 2006. I thought, well, I'm not going to do this again because it's going to take me another 12 years. It took me 12 years from the time I started writing until I got published my first short story. And I figured, well, if I come back, it's going to take me that long to come back again. But, the thing that I had going for me is I had a body of work to fall back on when I came back. I had 8 full-length novels and about 150, 200 short stories. And I remember the first one who called me when I said I was coming back was Richard Chismar from Cemetery Dance. And, I knew Richard back in the day. I mean, I was in the first 4 or 5 issues of Cemetery Dance magazine. We were pals before he even decided to do the magazine. And he called me up and he said, "I'm glad to have you back, man. What do you want to do?" So I told him, well, I want to do a novel and I want to do a short story collection. And so So we did Hell Hollow, which was one of the Zebra books that was scheduled, right before Zebra shut down. So we did that in hardcover, and I think it's 2010. And we did a short story collection called Midnight Grinding, which was a lot of my old small press short stories from between 1988 and 1996. So that was that was how I got started when I came back, with the two hardcover collections.
I always love hearing these connections with other authors too. It's so cool. Like, we've had Richard on the show. He's awesome. So
He is
I
awesome.
didn't even know you guys knew each other before. So that's really cool. Yeah.
We've known a long time. We used to call each other. That's about all to communicate with your fellow writers and all that. You either talk to them on the phone or you'd write letters. There wasn't any internet at that time. I think it was starting to come into play, but it wasn't. It was like AOL, where you had to dial up and everything, and and with that long lag on it. But me and Richard would sit for hours and talk on the phone and everything. And I remember one night he said, I'm thinking about starting a magazine, and that's how Cemetery Dance started.
Wow.
Oh man, Chasing the Boogeyman was one of my top favorite books.
Oh, wasn't that a wonderful novel?
Oh, so good. Yeah, we actually had the guy that did the audiobook on our show too, because the audiobook's great too. But yeah, it was cool reading fiction but partly true story about him coming up with Cemetery Dance. So
and he pulled that off very well. I mean, it was I think in lesser hands that would have been a tricky blending real life with that storyline, but he did a great job.
He told us he wrote the whole thing before he even told his agent. Like, he basically was too afraid to tell his agent that he did this. And he turned it in, and they're like, what is this?
When some people thought it was so realistic, they were kind of like giving him a hard time because it was too realistic or something. Like, they thought it was more of an autobiography or something. Yeah.
No, I loved it.
It's like, no, it's not an autobiography. It really is. Awesome. Yeah.
Speaking of autobiography, I've got one coming out in September.
Oh, no kidding.
Stygian Sky Media, who it's Jared Barber that puts Death's Head Press out. Started Stygian Sky Media to do like nonfiction books, and I think he's going to do some rock and roll books and stuff like that. And I was wanting to do a memoir and maybe a writing. It's like a combination memoir and writing guide. And so I went on Twitter and I said, would anybody be interested in me doing a memoir? And Brian King was one. He said, please, 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 please. So if Brian wants me to do it, I got to do it. So,
right. Yeah.
And I pitched it to Jared, and he said, yeah, I want to do it. So, so in September, I think September the 6th, we're gonna put out Southern Fried and Horrified, which is the story of my writing journey, from small child to present day, and it's going to have a lot of essays in it, and my favorite best of list and stuff like that, and a lot of writing advice. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out.
Oh, I'll have to pick that up for sure. I love those type of books. Like I said, I've read and listened to On Writing probably 5 times, and anytime an author I read puts something out like that, I definitely pick it up. So.
I do too. I love those kind of books.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'll shut up again. Sorry. I'll mute myself.
I got a question for you. So one of the things I love to ask horror authors is, what scares you personally the most, like in your life, that's not fiction? I guess
I'm 62 years old, so I guess you start thinking about your mortality. You start thinking, well, it's winding down now, and it's funny because when I was 16, I had this grand plan that I was going to get famous right after high school, and by the time I got in my late 50s or 60, I was going to retire. Well, now it looks like it's going backwards because everything's taking off right now. So, and I've got more. I mean, I've got more projects going on now than I ever did when I was, in my 20s and 30s. But I think my family has had a lot of Alzheimer's in their family. Yeah, I guess that's a kind of a concern of mine. That's kind of a fear of mine too, because
it's a tough one.
Just the thought of waking up one morning and not being able to write or something like that. That's it's kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Of course, I got my creepy crawler fears like spiders and snakes and stuff like that. I'm really scared of wasps. I mean, if a wasp gets in the house, I'll run into a wall trying to get away from it.
We got attacked by ground hornets last summer, man.
Oh, wow. It's the worst.
Yeah.
No joke.
Now, is ground hornets like yellow jackets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we call them, yellow jackets.
Yeah.
I've had some brushes with yellow. I actually one time hornets built this big old nest. I guess I was like 13, 14 years old, and hornets built this huge nest in our magnolia tree in the backyard. And Daddy said, well, we're going to go down at night when it gets cool. We're going to set that thing on fire. So we went down there and sprayed some kerosene on it and set it on fire. It didn't set the tree on fire. It's just set the big nest on fire. Well, the next day I went down there. I had to go down there and look, and there was one hornet left, and he was really pissed off. And I mean, we had an acre backyard, and I ran up that acre, and just as I got to the house, he nailed me in the back of the neck. And my folks had gone to town, and I was started feeling dizzy, and I laid down. It's a wonder I got up,
Sure.
But apparently I wasn't allergic to the venom or anything. But I mean, that was felt like somebody shot me in the back of the neck with a rifle or something.
Yeah, they're no joke.
No, I don't mess with it. Like we had yellow jackets were huge up where in New Hampshire where I.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid in the woods, I was down over this embankment with my friend, and my brother and his friend were up at the top of the hill, and they threw like this branch down to scare us. Well, it must have landed on a yellow jacket nest in the ground, because then I hear my brother go, "Oh, I got stung," and then I hear the other kid go, "Oh, me too," and me and the other kid thought they were just messing with us. So we're just walking up the hill, and all of a sudden, bam, 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 like we're getting peppered with wasp stings, and we just start running through the woods, and the other kid with me fell. So he got stung. I think it was like almost 100 times. Like we almost took him to the hospital. But we're running back down to our driveway and like stripping our clothes off and our underwear. Like anyone driving by was probably like, "Why are these kids stripping down in their underwear right now?"
Does that? If you see someone running around their house naked, they're probably being attacked by thieves. I think that's the move that you do. So we did the same thing. So
yeah. Ever since then, I'm not a fan of them. I don't know if my wife is thrilled with it, but like I'll pay a pest place to take care of massive nests before I do it myself. I'm not messing with that stuff. I've been attacked by nests probably 7 times in my life. I'm all set. So I don't know. Anyways.
I'm not really scared of spiders, but I don't care for them. But I did write a short story collection called "The Web of La Sanguinaire" and other arachnid horrors that came out last June, and I mean it's all spider stories, and because I'd written a few spider stories way back, in the small press days, and then I decided to write some new ones, and they're all different. They're all, some people said, "Well, how did you write, 10 short stories and they all be different, if it's just about spiders?" But it was like, I just love to write creepy crawler horror and body horror and stuff like that, So, and I'm thinking about doing a snake
oh boy,
collection too.
That'll be a hit.
I think mice and rats are probably my wife's fear. So being in New England, they all move inside this time of year, so it's very common to see.
We do too. Yeah, we get mice.
Yeah, very common. So, yeah, so it's an interesting thing, but that's just what they do. They come inside.
Well, not to turn it too serious, but I will say, just because we're talking about Thunderstorm, we're talking about Brian Keene, I got the Terminal book, and it's amazing. And I had never read this book when he first put it out, so I'm flying through this thing right now. And it's not even technically a horror novel, but it scares the crap out of me because it's about this young guy who gets terminal cancer, and and he has a family, and cancer scares the life out of me. Like
that's another one of my fears too.
You're speaking for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not original there, right? Like I've just had so many family members and like friends. Like it's just like I don't know. You feel this weird feeling like, oh, like, is that cancer? Like it's just
right.
It creeps me out. So yeah, so that book.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
I'll say that book's heartbreaking. Like it's. You guys need to read that book. It's I can't believe I didn't read it when he wrote that initially, but
actually I haven't read that book yet. I've actually got a signed copy because the friend that was wanting me to come back, he brought me a stack of books from convention one time, and a lot of them were Brian's books, and they were signed and everything. And that's one thing that brought me back, because the Risings, it said, thanks for the inspiration. So, he told me years later that, he probably wouldn't be writing if it wasn't for, the mass market writers and stuff like that. And he was a big fan of my books back then. Which was, when you wrote for Zebra, you didn't get any feedback. I mean, you wrote a book and it came out and was on the shelves for a few months, and then they pulled it and put out new stuff, and you never did hear. It wasn't like today where you get reviewed a lot and get feedback from fans and stuff like that. So you were kind of in the dark. You didn't know if people were reading your books. I mean, you got royalty checks and you knew you was making money, but you didn't ever get. I mean, I think the whole time I wrote for Zebra, I got 5 fan letters.
Yeah.
And that was just what Zebra sent me. I might have got more, but they just didn't put them in an envelope and send them to me.
Man. Well, there you go too. That's it all comes full circle, right? Like Brian Keene was inspired by you. You pick up Brian Keene, and it's kind of like
right.
Then you get back into writing it. So that's really cool.
Well, it's good when writers inspire each other, and this new crop of writers, Haley Piper and Laurel Hightower and Eric LaRocca, and they're setting the genre on fire now, and with these novellas and it's horror's starting to get as you go to like Barnes and Noble and the brick and mortar bookstores now, and they actually have a horror section again. Because they did away with it before, turned it into suspense or something like that. But
I used to hate that. You'd have to go in and you'd have to go through the suspense section, go through the sci-fi section, because some of them had elements of sci-fi, so they'd have them tossed in there, and I used to hate that. But now it's like
it's getting back. It's getting popular again, and like Joe Hill's helped a lot, and Stephen Graham Jones, and really bringing horror back to the forefront again, and of course King's still pumping it out after all these years.
I think one of the big catalysts that happened too recently in modern times was obviously when The Walking Dead came out.
Yeah,
that was a huge infusion to obviously bringing that type of genre prime time into people's homes on Sunday nights. I mean, that was just something that never happened up until that point. So
yeah, you're right.
catalyst and fuel for the genre. I think it was a great thing.
It did.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, I've written a zombie novel, and when I wrote, it kind of flopped because people had kind of gotten tired of zombies by the time I put this book out, and it was like 2018 or something. And I still think people like The Walking Dead, but you've got to do a fresh take on zombies. My book was called The Buzzard Zone, and it had a little twist as how people were becoming zombies, and it was called the Buzzard Zone because they could tell when zombies were around because the buzzards circled, and so I think it's a great book. People, I'd like more people to check it out. It's available in paperback and ebook, and so you can find it out there. And of course, if anybody wants signed copies, I've got plenty of those. So all you have to do is contact me through social media, and I'll be glad to fix you up.
Nice.
Be glad to draw some pictures in it too.
Honestly, I can't recommend it enough to people. If you can get in touch with an author and see if they'll do it personally, I mean, it also, I'm assuming it helps it make you guys a couple extra bucks too. It does.
Because you make more money selling it directly than you do through Amazon, because Amazon takes a big cut, and then your publisher takes a cut. But never think you're bothering a writer or by asking them, because most writers they have copies to sell, and I mean it really helps the writer, I'd love to. I mean, I got a big stack of dead eyes in the next room I'm going to work on tonight, and I think yours is in one of them.
Yeah.
Or I might have already.
I mean, my stack of stuff to read right now is so high. So, but I can't help myself. I'm like, man, I got to order this book. But yeah, I always struggle with, because I know, and I don't know if obviously if someone's buying your book, you're happy either way. But pre-orders are so huge for authors as well, which I didn't know until we started talking with authors. Because it helps the publishers see the interest. Yeah. But when you pre-order, you're usually ordering it through some other site, so you're not ordering direct. So I don't know. I mean, if authors tend to have a preference for pre-order versus ordering direct from them, but probably not.
Well, up until a few years ago, I didn't have any, after the Zebra books, sold out, I used to have some of the paperbacks, and I'd sell them at conventions and stuff. And then when they were gone, none of my stuff was available in paperback. So Crossroad Press started putting out, like Fear and Undertaker's Moon and Hell Hollow and all that, putting them out in paperback, and Sinister Grin did too. And then I started doing the little collections and putting them out in paperback. Now I've got quite a catalog of books I can actually sell and have at conventions. So that's a big plus having and with the Amazon direct printing thing, it's not as big a hassle or money investment as it used to be. I mean, they print the books on demand, and so it's it's easier to do it. That's why a lot of the small presses can release paperback books, and you can do hardcover books too, and they're only like a few dollars more than a paperback book. So I mean, this is the best time in the world to be writing horror right now, because the independent presses are very well respected, and they're all for the author. Zebra was all, they were only in it for the money, but the indie press, they're for the writer. They pay well, and so I mean, it's a great time to write, and it's a great time to read horror.
1,000% agree. I'm discovering a new author every day, it seems, especially with these online groups too. So my wife actually, I might want to start ordering digital because I'm starting to get some looks when stuff arrives in the mail. She's like, another book, John? Are you serious? I'm like,
Tell you're gonna like bequeath them to the Durgan Memorial Library or something, and that's your legacy in the world, right?
Man, I try a Kindle. I have a Kindle. I want a physical book. I can't help it. It's a habit. So
well, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, so I rarely read on a Kindle these days. But I'm like you. I've got a whole stack of to be read books that I love to support the new authors and stuff. So I'll get in touch up with them and get their new book and all that. And I've got a whole bookshelf of them. I hadn't had I write more than I read. That's supposed to be. I remember getting some advice one time. I don't know who told me that you should read, if you're a writer, you should read twice as much as you write. But if I did that, I'd never get anything done. So
right.
Yeah. How do you, I mean, because you like you said, you still work full time too. So I always, when I pick up a book now, I'm like, I look over at my laptop and I'm like, I feel guilty. I'm like, I feel like I should be writing right now instead. Right. So this show's helped us though, because I prepare for our guests, so I'll be able to read their books a lot too. So that
a lot of the podcasts and shows like this that gives the host a good opportunity to read the various authors and sometimes it gets overwhelming. When you want to read a author's stuff before he comes out, he or she comes on, and so I'm sure that a lot of them, I know some that listen to audiobooks just to kind of cut down on the time.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Now that's huge.
I've got a lot of my books on audiobook and you really as far as royalties, audiobooks make a significant more amount of money than a regular book. So
did not know that. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
This is stuff I should know as someone that wants to do this, right? I didn't know that. So
have you read,
you can always message me and I'll fill you in on some stuff if you have any questions.
Sure,
you doing it on reading on there, Ronald, too, on the audiobooks? Have you?
No, I've got a few. There's a few. Crossroad Press puts out all my books and audiobook, and I've got a fellow Tennessean who does he's done Fear and Undertaker's Moon and Hellholler, and he's got this really down home Southern accent, and he can do the voices incredible, and he does a lot of my audiobooks, and I actually had a lady narrator do a couple of my books because I've got my first book was called Hindsight. It was about a psychic child, a 9-year-old girl who had psychic powers during the Great Depression, and that was based on my mother because she actually did have a gift of second sight. A lot of people don't believe that, but I grew up with it. I saw her do it.
Yeah, she
was one thing she did on a regular basis was to predict people's deaths. About two weeks before they would die, she would like our next door neighbor had a garden, and when I was growing up, and he handed her a watermelon over the fence, and she saw him laying in the casket in his Sunday suit, and she knew he was going to die. And 2 weeks later, he did. And she would get these visions. It was like a flash. It wasn't like a vision or anything, but she had a lot of anxiety and fear her whole life because of that. Because it made her feel bad because she couldn't tell anybody. But Hindsight was based on that, and it was also based on a triple murder case that was happened in our family during the Great Depression. So I draw a lot on history, a lot on family history. My grandmother was a great storyteller. I think that's where I got my, a lot of my storytelling ability is when I was a kid, instead of out playing baseball or something, I'd want to sit on the front porch with her and listen to her tell stories, And I kind of absorbed that. And when I started writing books, I could write about the Great Depression or the Civil War or, World War II, and not really have to do much research. I could just kind of immerse myself in that time period.
Man, I thought I saw Rogério's eyes light up when you talked about the second sight, though. We talk about stuff like this all the time on the show.
We do. We do have some guests that speak about it, and it's not so weird for us.
No.
I think it's more common than people think, And my grandmother always told my mother, excuse me. My mother had typhoid fever when she was 8 or 9 years old. She would go down to a creek to get water, and she got covered with mosquitoes and got typhoid fever. It was in the hospital for several months, and my grandmother always told me when she came out of that fever that she started having episodes, and so she predicted deaths in the family, and she actually saved some people's lives, because I remember when I was a small child, we were going to church. She would always stop and pick up 2 ladies to go with her. And one Sunday she decided to go and get the other lady first that was out of the way. And she went and got her and went and got the other woman. And by the time we came back around, the first lady's house was fully engulfed in flames. And if we hadn't picked her up, she would have died, And, that's something that impressed me. I must have been 4 or 5 years old when that happened. But she had feelings like that all the time. And I sometimes I would ask her, am I going to sell this book, or is this or that happened? And she would have feelings about it, and she would give me her, her take on it, and it was usually right.
That's wild.
Got to be something in there, right?
Gift.
Yeah, got to be. There's too many. What do they say? How many coincidences does there need to be before something is the truth, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
People have so many stories like that, and it's just, it's. I think it would be ignorant and naive to think that that we know everything about the brain and how it works and what goes on in there, and, and that it can't be a growing organ too, right? It could be something that's evolving as species and creatures do too, right? It could be some people that more in tune with those things as we make evolution shifts into our future. Sure.
Yeah, man, that's a crazy story. So,
there are some theories about that, Joel.
Yeah, we can go deep down those rabbit holes. That'd be another.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. Hey, I feel like some of our best episodes are when we go there, where we dive deep into that stuff. But no, that's so for a book like Dead Zone, that probably terrified you then. I mean, that's the main character has similar things happen.
When I read the Dead Zone, it was like, this is familiar stuff to me.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't so far fetched.
Yeah.
I love that book. I mean, and I love the movie too with Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah.
But that's one thing that King appealed to me is, I pretty much did the same thing. King didn't write the same kind of book every time. He when I wrote for Zebra, Zebra liked to pigeonhole you. They wanted you to write 7 or 8 evil doll books or evil children books, or evil cat books, and I wouldn't do that. I mean, I wrote something different every time. You know, I would write like a werewolf book or a vampire book, and maybe a serial killer book, and that kind of drove them crazy sometimes because they couldn't they didn't know how to market me sometimes because I was all over the place, but I did that because I didn't want to get bored, and I didn't want to bore my readers by repeating myself.
Yeah, you didn't want to be just the zombie guy or the werewolf. Like that's, I mean, I love it when, like, eventually you get to the point where you okay, I like that author, so whatever they write, I'm gonna pick up, and it's cool to be surprised with where they take stuff. So
right,
yeah. Nobody wants to be a one-hit wonder. That's
No.
a terrible thing.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah. When you're not busy writing, Ronald, what do you enjoy doing just for personal hobbies outside of this vocation?
Well, me and my family like to travel a lot. Just before COVID hit, we in 2018, 2019, we went out west. I've been in Tennessee in the South all my life, and I don't think I'd ever gone across the Mississippi River. So,
oh wow,
we went out west, went out to New Mexico, Arizona, and the last trip we drove from Tennessee all the way out to California, out to Los Angeles and San Francisco, and then drove back. So that was really cool trips, and my kids loved it. And I got 3 kids. I got a 23-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 13-year-old. And so the younger 2 went with us, and we had a great time. So we like to travel, and I still like to do artwork, on the side, and read and stuff like that. So I guess that's pretty much my interest right now.
Did you find that trip part of some inspiration when you went back into working with Deadeye as part of that?
I'm sure I'm gonna draw on a lot of that because it's funny because I wrote a traditional Western book called Timber Gray, and years and years ago, and I found some old Western maps, that were made like in the 1880s, and I found a little town called Graybull, Wyoming, and that was a town in one of the in the book. And on our first trip, we went to Wyoming, and I drove through that town, and it was kind of cool because, here, 20 something years ago, I'd written this book with this town, and I was standing in it, so it was kind of cool. But I'm sure I'm going to draw on a lot of the places. We went to like Tombstone and Arizona and everything, and that was really neat because I've always been heavily into Old West history and Civil War history. So Deadeye is going to draw on a lot of historical characters and stuff like that, maybe some gunfighters and people like that. And so Deadeye is a mixed bag. It's got, something for everybody. And if you like to laugh, you'll laugh. And if you like to get scared, you'll probably get scared at a few places, and I'm really having a great time writing it. So the Western trip was it was an eye-opener. That might have been one reason that I thought about bringing Deadeye back, because I actually got out there and walked the deserts and stuff like that, and we did a lot of hiking, and we actually went to Bryce Canyon and hiked 5,000 feet down into the canyon, and writing now, that was a couple of years ago. I don't think I could make it now, but I'd have to get in shape. But
yeah.
But people were having like altitude sickness and stuff, and but I had a backpack full of Gatorade, and we went down there and back and just sipped on it the whole time. We were fine.
Huh.
Yeah, it's an amazing country out there, and I was fortunate. I've been down into Tennessee too. I was in a rock band after high school. We traveled through the East Coast, so I got to go down there. Of course, went to Graceland and did the Elvis thing. And, yeah, it was awesome. So big fan of that, that rock era, and country music's awesome. Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville. We played Murfreesboro, like all that stuff. Chattanooga. So got to spend.
Yeah, I'm about. I live about 60 miles east of Nashville.
Okay.
And just maybe 20 miles from Murfreesboro. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it was awesome. We had a great time. I'm so glad I got to get out as a young guy and see a lot of those things. And my kiddos are 5, 7, and 9, so they're getting that age where maybe we can eventually start to go around.
Yeah, I mean, I would wait until they get close to their teens, because taking small kids out in the desert and all that. They how kids are nowadays. They got to have their iPads and phones and stuff. And
honestly,
you get out there and you get out in the desert and there's no service. So
my wife's like, hey, do you guys want to go? Like, do you want to all of us go to Walmart to grab like our grocery order? And I'm like, no, that's a 10-minute drive. I'm like, I don't want to go in the car with everybody. I was like, can I just go get it? So I can't even imagine doing, like, growing up, we live up here in New Hampshire. We would drive down to Florida every year for 2 weeks. My dad wanted to do the road trip, and we would stop along pretty much every state in the East Coast. We only did Tennessee a couple times because we went through the Smoky Mountains. Yeah, but we didn't think anything of it. We were fine, and we didn't even have portable DVD players back then or phones. Like, I had my Walkman and my horror novels, and I was good. I would just sit in the car for the trip, and but I can't even imagine taking when we drive up to Maine and it's a 2-hour drive. It's like you would think we just drove cross country with these kids. It's insane.
Now, to show you how old I am, when I was a teenager, my daddy had an old '56 Chevrolet, and we'd go to Florida in it, and he rigged up an air conditioner with it using milk cartons, and he put ice in it and it'd blow cool air through the car.
Nice.
And I really got into rock music and stuff, like in I guess it was the mid '70s and everything, when I was a teenager. And he got a 8-track tape player and rigged it up with headphones, and I sat in the back seat the whole time and listened to 8-track tapes. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
And that that nowadays you just stream everything, and you have Spotify and all that. But back then, you had to improvise and all that. And I had my Doc Savage books I read, and so I was in the same boat when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it any other way. I just listen to my music, and I read so many books. Like, that's part of my brother. I have a twin. He didn't read books, so he was probably a little more bored than I was. But I would just zone out on a book, and next thing I know, we're in another state. So yeah. But what was I gonna say? I had a question earlier when we were talking about comics that I wanted to ask. Have you considered, or are you dabbling in that world at all still, as far as like writing comic scripts? Or
No, I would really like to do a graphic novel. If I could ever find the time to where I could actually devote all the time to doing the art and that, that'd be something. I'd love to do my book Fear. Fear is my, it was kind of my magnum opus, and I would love to do that as a graphic novel. As for doing like comic book kind of stuff, I've got a new collection coming out in February. It's EC flavored horror stories.
Yep.
Which everybody's always said that I have this EC flavor to my work anyway. It's my short stories and stuff have a kind of a twist endings and stuff where it's kind of, it feels like an EC comic book story. But this is it's called, and we did a play on the old EC comics. It's called the first one's going to be Haunt of Southern Fried Fear. So, and I've got an artist who does a lot of my covers, Alex McVeigh, and he's in this great EC style cover for it, and it's going to be all ghost stories, EC flavored ghost stories, and I'm going to be doing artwork inside that's like comic book panels with with the word balloons and the caption boxes and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to start working on that, and I'll probably work on that this weekend. We're expecting a huge snow tomorrow night. They're saying 8 to 10 inches, so
oh boy.
Maybe they'll give me time to sit down and not have to worry about work for a while and do some artwork. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and I'm going to have some little ads in the back, like the old comic book, the old advertisements, and that's going to be fun too. So and we're going to put out for the next 3 years, we're going to put out one of those every February.
That's cool.
Yeah,
so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking, the little short story collections I put out. I've got I've got the Christmas one, and I've got 2 Halloween ones, and I actually did an Irish horror tales called Irish Gothic. Came out last March around St. Patty's Day. That's was kind of a departure for me because I've written Southern style stories for so long, and this I had to write like in the speech rhythms and of Ireland. That was both sides of my family came from Ireland, and I've never been there before. That's another thing on my bucket list. I'd like to go to Ireland and visit some of the places my family came from. But I wrote this little story collection, and wrote it in the storytelling style of the Irish, and it really did very well. I've actually had people from Ireland tell me that it sounded like somebody who grown up there. So that was a big relief to it went over like that, because but like I said before, if a writer don't take chances and do what they feel like doing, they need to do, they can stagnate and all that. But I've always tried to take chances with my writing and stay true to myself. A lot of there's some writers who they want to write for the audience, and it's hard for them to do that, because you've got to write for yourself first and then write for your audience.
Yeah, that's good advice. Rogerio could talk about Ireland.
Spend
some time there.
Spend some time.
Yeah.
If you haven't been there, make sure you're going to visit that place. It's
I need to make plans to do that. That's I'm planning on retiring maybe at the end of this year, early next year. Just devote my time to writing and traveling. So maybe that'll be something we can do.
Yeah, that's a bucket list spot for me too. Durgan's actually Irish. Originates from Durkin, which is Irish. So I definitely want to get there. But how long were you there, Rogerio? How long did you?
9 years.
9
really?
years. Jeez,
yeah. I spent 9
That's
years
great.
there. Yeah. When I left, wasn't back in 2012, and actually at the time I had an Irish accent. Then it kind of mixed up, but it's just funny because the first time, and I saw an American there, and I met an American in Dublin, and the Irish accent in some places there is so thick, Americans couldn't get them. Like, what did you say? And I found myself in a strange place. I'm a foreigner, translating English to another English-speaking person. That's unbelievable. And it's an amazing place. An amazing place.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
If you like if you like drinks, it's the best place to be on earth. But if you like nature, culture, books, music, it's all over the place.
That sounds right down my alley.
Yeah.
We'll have to make an effort to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just coming back to your writing, I was about to ask you, and according to your experience, what keeps a reader reading a book from the cover to the back in a day? Because some people just do that kind of thing. What do you think are the right elements to keep someone stuck to it?
Well, I always think that the characters are the most important part of the book. They're ones who motivate the events. They're the ones who, a reader, they like to invest in the character. I mean, they like to emotionally invest in the character, and with horror, I mean, a lot of times their characters get killed in the plot and all that. And I've had readers tell me they cried their eyes out because one of their favorite characters, mine, died or something like that. But I've always tried to hook the reader in the first. I'm old school, so I usually have an epilogue and a prologue to my novels, and I always try to hook them with that first epilogue where they've got to turn the page to the first chapter, and that's a conscious thing I've always tried to do, and I guess just make story is the most, that's an important element. Don't put too many subplots in because it gets confusing sometimes. That's one of the things with Zebra. I always had like 3 or 4 subplots because you had to to write such a long novel, you had to keep it moving in different directions and stuff. And I tried to do my best in keeping that interesting, and I think I've succeeded in doing that. But that's you've got to give the reader interesting characters and characters they care about, and villains that they loathe, and for a long time, the vampire, in the 80s and 90s was the sympathetic character, and when I wrote Blood Kin, my vampire book, I went back to the old school vampire. It was, pure evil and all that. And actually, he was a traveling preacher that was turned into a vampire. So, I just, I like to keep the reader entertained all the way through the book, and with the short stories too. Just to just keep the reader entertained, and where they feel like they're not reading the same thing that other authors are offering them.
Do you think that a bit of disappointment is a nice ingredient sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes I finish a book or a film, and I'm not completely satisfied. I say, "Oh my God, why did that happen?" And this is something that bothers me at the time, but at the end, I want to see more of it. I want to read more of it.
Yeah,
it's funny the way it goes.
Well, I do that. I do that sometimes. Like my book Fear, I'm actually going to do a sequel to that. I was planning on doing it this year, but I'm so involved with Deadeye right now, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do the sequel. But I wrote that book 27 years ago, and it's just now. I mean, right now it's getting very popular, and I've come. I thought, well, maybe I should just leave fear alone. I mean, it was, it's probably the best book I ever wrote. Maybe I should just leave it alone, not do a sequel. But I've come up with an incredible idea for a sequel, and so I'm going to go for it, and bring back. I'm going to put elements in this book that kind of actually, in Fear, there's an evil county called Fear County that's the most evil place on Earth, and during the course of Fear, the book Fear, they went from one horrifying adventure to another. It was almost like a succession of short stories halfway through the book, and so the sequel's kind of going to explain why it's so evil, and I mean, there's going to be a little cosmic horror sprinkled in there, and maybe some shifting of dimensional things in temporal zone, just some stuff I've never done in a book before, because like even at this point in my career, I don't want to stagnate and keep doing the same stuff, over and over again. So
yeah, well, that'll be something that a lot of people are talking about, I'm sure, when that comes out, for sure. So when you mentioned, though, you posted this the other day, I think it was, your schedule for 2022, and I was like, holy crap. Like how is, like, you got like 5 books coming out this year, don't you? It's wild.
Well, yeah, actually I've got more than that I can't talk about right now.
Oh, okay.
I could have 8, that's not counting the anthologies I'm in, and this is the busiest I've been. I mean, I was never that busy in the 90s. It's just I hope I can keep it up, because it's just been it's been incredible the last couple of years. I mean, and I've got more ideas in my head now than I could probably do the rest of my life, but I'm gonna sure try.
Yeah,
that comes with life experience.
Yeah, that's.
I think it's come to the it's like you come to a point in your career where your confidence level is at a point where you don't worry about whether anybody's going to like it or not. You just let's do it and have fun with it.
Yeah, like the prose is second nature almost at that point, right? You're just let's tell the story.
Now I can sit down and write a short story in 2 hours. And some the newer writers agonize over a short story for weeks, at a time. And I've gotten to the point where if Kim McKinley at Silver Shamrock says, I need a story for this anthology, I'll sit down, I'll kind of brainstorm for a few minutes, and I'll sit down and write a story and send it to them 2 or 3 hours later,
That's wild. Yeah. I think for the younger writers like myself, it's just getting comfortable with the prose and
it is
word choice and going back and reading and like, it doesn't sound good, like so I can't wait for the day where that's just in the rear view and I can just sit there and write the story I want to tell. But
it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to get to the point where right now I'm pretty much kind of orchestrating my own career. If I want to put out a book, I've got like 5 or 6 publishers that I work with, and if I have a book that I'd like to do, a reprint, do like some of the Zebra books, I can go and ask them if they want to do it, and they pretty much want to do it. And I've got several cover artists that I work with that do the covers, and so it's a really good time in my career where I'm calling the shots pretty much, and it wasn't always like that. It wasn't like that when I wrote for Zebra, because they had the option of changing the titles of my books or doing whatever cover, and they put out some terrible covers sometimes. Fortunately, I missed the skeleton era where they had skeletons on all the covers, so I came in right after that.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that anyone that's a fan of yours would probably say the same thing, but you've earned the opportunity to call your shots. So so it's awesome to see, and I'm excited to see these books this year. But we said we'd check in at 90 minutes. Per usual, we didn't. So we're at almost 2 hours now. But is there anything? I mean, obviously, Deadeye. Did anything else you wanted to talk about or make sure we mention here before we go?
Not that I think we've covered a lot of ground. I don't think I can think of anything else. I think I've mentioned all the. I am going to start re-releasing all the Zebra books in paperbacks. So, Hindsight that I was talking about with the Psychic Child will be coming out like in March or April in paperback. And then around October, we're going to put the Darken out. It came out originally as something out there, and another one of those Zebra titles, one of those generic Zebra titles that came up. But so that's pretty much all I've got going this year. I guess that's enough, and it's going to keep me busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Making us look bad.
Yeah. We have a comic book that we're about to release called Dead Ball, and I keep almost calling Deadeye Dead Ball. So I'm like I gotta stop. I can't do that. I'm not trying to promote our own stuff here. But I can't wait to read the book. So anyone watching, definitely be sure to pick that up. And like we said a couple of times, like Ronald said himself, reach out to him, get a personal copy, and he'll be happy to send it to you. So
I sure will.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's been great sharing with you. Thanks for coming by tonight, Ron. I'm sure out of all the other books you have coming out, we'll have plenty of opportunity to have you back on if you'll put up with us again. We'd love to have you back. So
I appreciate y'all inviting me. I've had a great time.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Keep up the good work. Keep them in line in Tennessee. Hope everyone else has a great weekend. Stay safe in the snow and the cold, depending on where you are. It's going to get wild on the East Coast this weekend.
We're getting slammed Monday. That's when we're getting it. So
yeah, it's coming up. It's going to be cold before then, so good times.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I hope you have a good night. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.